Welcome to the ReGen Brands podcast. This is a place for consumers, operators, and investors to learn about the consumer brands supporting regenerative agriculture and how they're changing the world. This is your host, Kyle, joined by my co-host, AC, who's going to take us into the episode.
On this episode, we have Stephen Smith, who is the founder and CEO at Onda. Onda is supporting regenerative agriculture with its regenerative, whole plant, and full spectrum hemp products that include oils, tinctures, capsules, and topicals. In this episode, we learn about Stephen's wild journey in regenerative agriculture that led him to the creation of Onda. We get educated on the major differences between the vast majority of hemp cultivation and Onda's regenerative model. And we talk about the key drivers and tools for shifting our world to a regenerative paradigm long term. Without further ado, let's dive in.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the ReGen Brands podcast. We are fired up today to have Stephen Smith from Onda with us. So welcome,
thanks
Stephen.
for having me, guys. Pleasure.
Absolutely. You know, I was lucky enough to meet Stephen for the first time at Expo West. Sat across from each other at a fantastic Puesto Mexican-themed dinner. It was a great night. And yeah, man, we're super excited to have you on. You know, I am not super familiar with this space, so this is going to be a lot of learnings for me here personally, and I hope we get to share those learnings with the audience. So for those who are unfamiliar with Onda, you know, just give us a quick lay of the land. Like, what do you produce? Where can people buy your stuff? Just a real quick overview.
Sure. So we focus on producing nutrient-dense, slow-infusion, hemp and herbal plant medicine from regenerative food farms. So we produce capsules, tinctures, topicals, and we really want to help folks with anxiety, sleep, immunity, management, and just using this traditional medicine to chill out. You can find us at ondawellness.com. We sell in some select retailers, but happy to ship to your door.
Heck yeah. And Onda is ONDA wellness.com.
Yeah. ONDA.
Okay. And which is your favorite product? What do you like to use the most?
You know, let's see, what do I use the most? It depends on the stage of my life, but I mean, I have a kit. Like I created a kit, right? So that when I'm traveling, when I'm really pressed with work, if I'm really exerting a lot athletically, I have this plant medicine support. So it's actually more of the care kit, which is adios anxiety, solid sleep, and innate immunity. So I used to use more of the capsules, but I'm really steering a lot more towards those three right now. So the adios anxiety is great for daytime stress and anxiety. Or like right now I'm in Los Angeles, and I feel like whenever I get within like a 30-mile radius, I start dosing just because the traffic and the energy and the people, it's a real spike for this country mouse. So that's great. And then, you know, last night I had the solid sleep, which has chamomile and California poppy and our Onda hemp oil in it. And I woke up to the rain, and I just felt so regenerated, refreshed.
Nice.
So, and then of course I saw you guys at Expo West. And so I was, you know, dosing up on the immunity, which feels like a nice shield. So yeah, that's kind of my flow.
All amazing stuff. Stephen and I met a couple years ago at the 2021 RFSI Forum, and he sampled me up in the back of the room, and I've been hooked ever since.
So some things don't change.
I use the full spectrum
since high school.
Yeah. I use the full spectrum oil every night when I go to sleep, and my favorite product is actually the body balm. I've never been a big fan of like aloe for sunburns. I think it smells weird. It feels weird. I don't really think it works. So I'm anti-aloe, but the Onda Body Balm is like my secret weapon. And like going into spring and summer, I would tell everyone, don't walk, run to ondawellness.com and get your
Man, that's brilliant. That's such a funny thing you brought up, because I never, when we started making it years ago, I never thought about using it as like specifically a post-sun product, right? Because people think, oh, I have aches and pains, I want to put it on my joints. But yeah, I mean, if you're out all day in the sun, you forget a hat, you know, like you've got the fair skin. Any of us, you know, it's like I get sunburn right here, right? And you just you put a little bit of that Onda oil on, and it's anti-inflammatory, like not only in your joints but topically. So yeah, I've never burned. or blistered or whatever after being in the sun. So it's like always surprising me in its benefits. But that's a really solid product too. And we don't have 30 SKUs. We have a tight group of stuff we really love.
Right. And I use it every time I shave because I have very sensitive skin. So I actually use it as an aftershave.
Note
which
to self.
I couldn't recommend enough as well.
Aftershave product. Cool. I love hearing that.
Stephen, you've been in the game for a while, my friend. You were doing this regenerative thing before it was as cool as it is now. So take us back to when the hell this all started, why it started, and just how Onda came.
Yeah, it's really wild to see it kind of reaching broader groups of people. It's quite exciting. I'd say it goes back for me to 2010, and I was kind of bouncing around South America, traveling after I had saved up some cash, and I came across. Well, I was hanging out with my my college roommate, and he was in Argentina at the time, and his now wife at the time was his girlfriend, had worked in Napa, California for a winemaker. And I figured, well, that seems like a good next step. I'll go help someone drive a tractor and, haul grapes or do whatever just to learn.
Right.
And so I harassed this guy for a while until he said, yeah, come on up, I'll hire you. That was my strategy in my 20s, is just to be the squeakiest wheel. And it worked. And it changed my life. Like this guy, David Mahaffey, who I actually saw a couple weeks ago. I mean, he's such a, he taught me these concepts of being a polymath and an autodidact, right? Like knowing a little bit about a lot of things, asking for help, teaching yourself, finding connections intellectually, and bridging knowledge. I mean, he's a dear friend. He's a mentor. The guy used to hang out with Andy Warhol. He taught film and photo at Harvard. He was in the Navy. I mean, the stories go on and on about this guy. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, his Ansel Adams collection is brilliant. He's a master woodworker. The guy could make a violin in 3 days. I mean, he's just he's a genius in my opinion, and I adore him. So spending time with him was beyond expansive. But what I was seeing for the first time, well, maybe acknowledging for the first time, was like living systems and the dynamic aspect of the interconnectedness between these systems. And so, he had some animals running around in the vineyard. The backyard was a permaculture garden, but without a label on it. It just was, right? So he was growing food. They were operating in these systems, him and his wife, who was doing organic certifications in the 80s and was trying to set up nutrient density testing in grocery stores in 84. Talk about pioneers. Yeah, you should get them on the podcast.
Wow.
So and I don't want to digress too much, but nonetheless, I found myself in this nest of she was a Stanford PhD, like just brilliant people who exposed me to kind of an aspect of regenerative permaculture, just dynamic eco farming. And then I worked in the wine business there in Napa for a bit, and really where things kind of took the next big step was when I went back to Colorado, and I was the director of business development for Jackrabbit Hill Farm and Peak Spirits, which is out in western Colorado. And that was a great story. Also happened on a motorcycle trip, right? Oh, I was on a motorcycle trip in South America when I found this gig in Napa. So I'm bouncing around western Colorado, thinking like maybe there's some crazy person out here that's growing grapes at 6,000 feet. And there was.
He's manifesting your own future,
I swear to God, I was like, I heard that there's a biodynamic farm in the middle of nowhere. So I roll up and the gate was closed. It said closed, like who trespasses, right? Wow. But I just had this feeling, and I went in and I was like, hey, I'm looking for Lance, and I heard about and he was just kind of taken aback. And actually he was quite annoyed. But what was interesting is like by the time like I like turned the conversation organically. I had no motive. I just was passionate to learn what the hell he was doing out there on that mesa, with this biodiversified system. And anyway, long story short, he was like, this guy could be in sales. So he hired me to run business development, and I learned about Rudolf Steiner and biodynamic farming, and what to me at the time was kind of the the original ReGen Ag certification, right? Not to say that this is all old world farming, right? Indigenous wisdom, pre-industrial farming, right, across the board. But Rudolf Steiner brought it together in a pretty interesting way and integrated a really lovely cosmic component, which I find pretty fun and fascinating. And to the point of Lance and Anna at Jackrabbit Hill Farm, if you looked across the fence, it was like tumbleweeds and sagebrush, and here they are, bees and bugs and critters, and it was this super vibrant place on Earth. So that really lit me up. So here I am. It was like 2013 or 2012 maybe, and I'm in like Denver talking about like putting cow poop in a horn and how it makes better gin. So that's a bit of a bit of a joke, but at the same time, I was trying to sell super high end eau de vie, grappa, spirits, wine from the first biodynamic certified farm in Colorado and from the country's first organic distillery. That taught me a ton about business, about sales, about storyline, about how to bring a value add product from a farm to market and be that kind of interlink, that chain. So that was super pivotal. And then I worked on a 90,000 acre cattle ranch as a ranch hand, moving cows, fixing fences, in Southeast Colorado. And then they knew that I had some business development skills and networking. So I helped set up a locations program so that they could diversify their revenue from film and video. And so we did some interesting things there. And so I felt like I had that was rounding out an aspect of land stewardship and management from the animal husbandry side. I never really did the veggie farming thing as much as I wanted to, although I always had a garden and my family did as well. But anyway, so when I came into Onda, and I don't know how in depth you want to get into the kind of the early days there, but I was inspired by site-specific ingredients, direct relationships, regenerative agriculture models where crops were in rotation, soil was being built by polycultures of animal impact, responsible grazing and rotation, all the stuff that lights us up, but no one gave a shit about. And pardon my language, but no one really, I mean, I got laughed at, like literally. I remember specifically, I said, well, are they running chickens through the hemp field, or is there any sort of animal impact? And they laughed at me. I remember even my former business partner, I mean, she just was like, what? Like, no one could care less. Right. And that was 2016. So, at the heart of my vision was, and I have to add, my senior high school thesis paper in 1999 was about hemp. So I'd like to think that this has been in my destiny, my stars, the chart. Like I was growing cannabis in the woods of North Carolina in the 90s. Like what a psycho, but I love the plant, the plant like just was this feminine support, this power, this generous like medicine crop that, I wasn't drinking at the parties in high school, right? I was the guy, yes, I'll roll you another one. I was the guy that was really into these plants. So anyway, when hemp started to kind of these minor cannabinoids started to gain some buzz around medicinal benefits, the stars aligned and we started this experiment. I don't know if that's kind of the high levels. I wanted to not get too detailed, but it all. I have to say this, and then I'll shut up for a second. My grandmother introduced me as the grandson who doesn't know what he wants to be when he grows up one time, and that's some passive aggressive junk right there. And I love her, but I remember that vividly, and I thought to myself, you know what? It's all connected, and I will string it together. And every one of those farm jobs, which maybe was like, oh, this guy's lost, he's interning. Every one of those gave me the confidence, knowledge to be a foundational brick in Onda. So don't give up, kids. Trust yourself.
What a message. I think it's the first time the kids have been addressed on the podcast, and I appreciate that.
Hey, man, that's the only hope we have.
It's true. Well, hey, you did a good job of kind of building us to like the start of Onda. So tell us about like, why,
Yeah.
you mentioned cannabinoids getting a little bit more traction and like becoming commercially acceptable and a viable, business. So when you first wanted to start this venture, what did that look like? You mentioned you got laughed at by a few different hemp farmers who were probably doing monocrop. Like, how did you find the right suppliers? Like, walk us through that part of the story.
Sure. So I was actually flying back to Colorado for Christmas, and someone had given me some CBD oil. This was 2016, and I was tired, I was hungover, and I was kind of had a cold, and so I mixed together all the herbs and wellness tinctures, and actually it wasn't tinctures, it was vitamins, herbs, and some hemp oil. And by the time I got in the Uber and got on the plane, I was just like, all right, I felt so good. I was like, this is what I love in my body about cannabis, but I'm crystal clear.
Yeah.
I could read, I could journal. The seat was so comfortable, says no one, right? Like what? I felt so relaxed. And so when I landed in Colorado, I thought, and I was working as a photographer at the time, kind of after I was doing those farm and ranch gigs, I had a agrarian photography business. And I said, this is it. Like, this is a feeling. This is something. This is an experience that I think we can share and replicate. So the origin of Onda was, and mind you, this was pre-Farm Bill, so it was a Schedule 1 drug.
Wow.
I mean, and then Schedule 1 means no noted medicinal benefits, right? I mean, how insane
research isn't even allowed. Is that correct for the most part on Schedule 1?
Pretty much. I mean, how insane is that? Cannabis, a medicine that we've been using probably arguably longer than any others, right? So anyway, asinine. Yeah. So anyway, another aspect that I need to mention of the story, which is near and dear to me that we don't share publicly on, at least on the branding, is that I had a dear friend who passed of a seizure a year and a half before that kind of aha moment. And May was using cannabis successfully to mitigate and manage her epileptic episodes. Her parents had a cannabis dispensary in Colorado. I had a very, very strong dream message from her that I was going to go into business with her parents, and I needed to just pay attention. That was it. And it was like bold letters, type like header, like, just really clear. And I was like, okay. And I listened to these things. I've had some prophetic vision or dreams in the past, and hopefully some of them don't have, and some of them have. And so I called her parents and I said, hey, I know y'all are in the space. Like, do you think that there's an opportunity for these other cannabinoids to evolve into medicinal products for people? She said, well, we actually have a friend that's playing around with some formulas and some processes. And then it began. And we put in a couple $1,000. I did all the concepting, the vision, the creative, the branding, the marketing, the sales, like the website, all that kind of front end stuff. Annie was absolutely crucial in operations, finance, back end, so we drafted up this experiment, called it Onda, and, had an offshore bank account, right? Like, I don't think people understand what we had to do to get clean, healthy, regenerative hemp medicine to people in the early days. And it included some stuff that, people do if they're selling guns or other nefarious stuff. But we were on the other end. We felt like we were just trying to pioneer access to this medicine, especially thinking about May and how it helped her. And so that was at the heart of Onda was, hey, if you can sleep better, if you can manage your anxiety, avoid the high, we didn't really care. I mean, THC is a fantastic, cannabinoid. It just wasn't our focus. And so my vision was to do these juice shots, and it was going to be energy, immunity, relax. And that was 2016, right? Now you see that stuff everywhere. And part of me is kind of kicking myself for not having had the gusto to pioneer that more aggressively. However, HPP and that kind of packaging and all those systems are more complex. And we literally started with like oil in a jar, right? Oil in a dropper.
Right.
And so we just kind of put something up on Squarespace. And then from then on, it was running in hot sand uphill both ways for 6 years.
Barefoot.
The question at the beginning though, Stephen, so CBD products were available then. Obviously there were still some dispensaries, even though it was a Schedule 1. Was the vision like, hey, the what's available on the market just isn't good enough and we want to make like something so much better? Because like that's my personal experience with the products. Or was it just it was still so early that wasn't a thing yet? Like take us back to like what were you making a CPG brand? Did you just not know? Like what were you setting out to do at that point really?
Dude, I didn't even really understand. I didn't even understand. No is the answer. I don't know.
Yeah.
There was no CPG vision, right? Like the last thing I wanted to do was to create more packaging junk, more buzzy bullshit.
Yeah.
Like you go to Expo West and it's like fake this, fake that. It's
Right.
just the last thing I wanted was to be contributing to that. However, I did want to be a part of. I always believed in cannabis. I always I felt the effects of it, and I wanted to create access. And I wanted to put my energy into something that wasn't taking photos that I knew I would never be able to buy a house one day, right? I mean, that's debatable because people do get paid a lot of money to take pictures, but I was interested in a product that could be scaled and grown and feel what it was like to expand and contract and have a business that was different than a creative business. So there was no real specific goals of outshining. I mean, no one knew the difference between any of the products, right? We just got so lucky that the first people we started working with, turned me on to the style of, I mean, we've evolved our own path since then, but turned us on to a style of harnessing those nutrients that was inevitably very different from anyone else still that's doing it. So we started in like an old world. We started more of in the herbalist apothecary mindset, whereas most people came in from the pharmaceutical side, which was, CO2 extractions, isolates, broad spectrum, and we were soaking hemp in oil and pressing it out and putting it in a jar.
Wow.
I want you to really explain that for the average consumer, because that's really important to this, right? As a former D1 athlete, I had used CBD products a ton, and they were tasteless, smellless, clear, liquids that weren't effective, right? And your product, when I use it, it is beautiful green, it has a beautiful smell, and it actually works. And the growing process is a part of that, but also the production process. So just break that down for the common person that has no idea what any of that means.
Yeah. So see how green, I mean, you can see this is not yellow. It's not clear. It's super rich in phytonutrients, chlorophyll, polyphenols, fatty acids. So the short of it, Anthony, is that we're like fresh squeezed orange juice, and other brands are like emergency powder or Tang. They're over processed, they're stripped, they're narrowly focused, and that's a cultural phenomenon, right? Like, monocrops, isolation, individuality, this whole concept of like
yield.
Right. It's not considering living systems thinking. It's not considering holistic models and paradigms. It's not considering biodiversity, diversity, all of it, right? So what we're embracing from a conceptual perspective and a very literal perspective is the efficacy of retaining the natural array of constituents, right? We're the geeky natural winemakers, right? You farm on the highest level. Chris and Kate farm on the highest level, our farm partners. And then my job is to gently not screw it up on the way to the bottle. because it's easier to chop and break and slice and dice and play God with nutrients or food, and then like reconstitute it in an effort to control margin, maximize consistency, all these other values. But it's harder because you can't hide anything. Like this is literally just hemp flower soaked, pressed, percolated, my process, which I'll get into in a second, and then put into a bottle. So you can't hide impurities. You can't hide lead, cadmium, toxins, any of that stuff, because everything has got to be super clean and super legit. So the difference is, old world, slow infusion, embrace all of the nutrients because we believe, and anecdotally, we consistently get the echo, the response, the support that, oh my God, I feel this like I've never felt any of this before. And I said, yeah, because we keep the whole plant together. We keep all the stuff. So if it's clear and it's yellow, it's already lost a lot of nutrients.
So take us back to the actual agricultural process here. You mentioned your farming partners do it right. So talk about how, for lack of a better term, conventional hemp is grown versus regenerative hemp, and why that's different and why that's important.
Yeah, so when the Farm Bill passed, you saw a huge rush of people planting hemp. And it really spooked me because I knew what the market was able to take. I knew where the bottlenecks were. Even from my little business, I had a feel for what was going on. And yet you could see hundreds of acres of hemp. And I thought, well, am I missing the boat here? Am I completely out of the loop? Where is all this going? Sure enough, most of it died in the field. But what you would see is you would see grain, corn fields that were just converted to hemp, and a lot of plastic mulch, right? So monocropping, a lot of plastic mulch. I can't speak to fertilizers and whatnot, but presumably people were definitely boosting the soil.
I've never heard the term plastic mulch before. Is that literally like recycled plastic shredded up, put on top of the soil, and used as mulch?
It's a little misleading, but plastic mulch is just the rollout tarp. So it's a mulch in the sense that it covers and is a weed suppressant, but it's not chopped up, thank God. Although, you know what happens after the season or after the year is that stuff gets left in the soil. It blows across the field, ends up in someone else's field. It's a mess. So anyway, so what I was always excited about was integrating hemp kind of as the secondary, tertiary, wherever, into a food system. So I'm not interested, sure as hell don't believe in growing that stuff inside. That just makes my skin crawl, right? And I also am not interested in supporting monocropping, and I'm certainly not interested in the plastic weed cover. So when Kate approached me a couple years ago, Kate Havstad and Chris Cassad, I had been thinking like, God, I'd love it if they would grow for us. I wonder what that would look like. And then she called and she brought it up. And so what they're doing, which is so fascinating, is that, if they've got, well, I'm just talking percentages, not acreages, but, we'll say they've got carrots, potatoes, corn, a pollinator, a couple rows of pollinator crops, some herbs, next to
Cattle.
Exactly, next to polycultures of there's pigs right there. That was corn the year before. There's cattle there. There's turkeys, chickens. It's biodiversity at its best, and they're doing the best they can in an arid landscape to build soil health with the water restraints that they have. But if you think about it, hemp is like our hemp because we're an artisan boutique brand. We don't need 100 acres of hemp. Our few acres of hemp is less than 10% of their rotation, right? But from an ecological and financial perspective, our hope is that if you can profit a couple $1,000s per acre on grass or whatever, hay or corn, a multiplier of that, if this whole system is working, and granted it's rough and we haven't fine-tuned it, but we're seeing the model continue to evolve, is that hemp can be both that ecological and financial bumper crop for a food farm. And of course, as we scale and as we grow and as we find, slow success, we're not interested in saying grow less corn or grow less potatoes. We're interested in building a web of other regenerative biodynamic farmers across the country or near our processing where we can integrate this model. So it's really a medicine crop on a food farm, definitely with animals, right? Really, really outspoken about the impact of having animals in rotation for growing medicine, because we see the effects every year. So that's the regenerative model that we are excited about being a part of and trying to pioneer is medicine crop, high value medicine crops integrated in with food and livestock.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
it makes sense. It feels good.
Couple things there. So Kate and Chris are awesome people. We'll link to their website. If you're in the Central Oregon area, you should definitely connect with them. They have a great meat box program. Kate makes hats. Kate's launching a regenerative leather business. So we'll throw some links in the show notes. And like Stephen said, Kyle lives in Bend full time in Central Oregon. I live there part time, and Stephen lives just north of there. And it's a challenging region from a precipitation and a water rights situation. And those folks are one leading the way from a figuring it the hell out and still having success parameter. And then I know Kate's really on the precipice of a lot of like legislation and advocacy around just protecting farmers and farmers' rights to that water. And last thing I'll add is like the hemp problem and the hemp boom is like very real. And like it usually, to just give an example of how it trickles down to just like a regular person, I went to look at a ranch in the Bend area, absentee California owner, bought it to plant hemp, planted hemp, put all the plastic in all 90 acres at the ranch, and then literally tilled the plastic into the soil.
Gosh.
So the place was totally degraded. There was no life. There was no plants. There was no animals. And it literally, the plastic is in every tillable acre, every arable acre of this place. And I mean, it was a beautiful piece of property, but I just looked at it and said, I can't fix this. I'm not the person to fix it, but it's just sad that
I'm in California now. If you have his address.
Yeah.
That breaks my heart, man. Yeah. That's a rough example, but it's a real one. So
what's the problem with growing it indoors? Because I mean, I feel like most of the cannabis that is smoked, at least today, or maybe even in the CBD world, is grown indoors, right? And like, why is that an issue?
It's super resource intensive. Like if we're working with a plant that can sequester 10 times on average the amount of carbon per acre as trees, and we're looking not only so there's a huge, so that we haven't even gotten to like the carbon aspect, right? Like it's cool to grow it in the food farm for all the reasons that we just touched on, but if we're trying to restore grasslands because they're helping to put carbon back into the earth through responsible grazing, and we want to grow more veggies and we want to do these things, like hemp is a huge carbon sequester. Not only is it great for, depending on the genetics, fiber, insulation, medicine, and whatnot, but so you see these people growing inside because they at one point were getting top dollar for smokable THC cannabis, but it takes they're in Southern California in a warehouse pumping lights, so you're running all the lights, so there's that energy suck. They're basically using soil, pumping it full of steroids, and then dumping it, and then restocking it. It's just shitty. It's like we should be growing this stuff in the earth, and Sun and Earth, which is a fantastic certification. We're friendly with them. Chris and Kate's farm is Sun and Earth certified. It's all about getting folks on the smokable or ingestible, whatever, the THC side of cannabis to go sun grown for so many reasons. But it depends on who's running the show. I mean, these business only minds that don't give a shit about, that don't care about anything other than control, consistency, margin, and all these very conventional industrial values, they love it. They love it. They put a timer, they put a computer system, and it creates 28% THC, and they have a really tight business. But they're not farmers. They're factory operators. They're factory managers. And farming and ranching, as some of us know, it's like surfing. You are in reaction to, you are in partnership with nature. You are humbled by what we are a part of, not what we control. So it's a mindset shift, and it's just purely, in my opinion, coming from, the industrial commodity commercial mindset, which is killing the whole planet and us. So that's part of why I don't support inside growing. It's just a missed opportunity, and it's lazy, and it's selfish.
Stephen, you are a master of metaphors, my friend. I love the orange juice metaphor earlier. I love the surfing metaphor you just brought up. You mentioned the 28% THC for the indoor grown crop, computer system, etc. One of the things that we talk about a lot is the added nutritional density of food that is grown. And I'm curious, from like a research perspective, is there like measurements of cannabinoids in regeneratively grown hemp versus conventionally grown hemp? And if so, like what does that look like, and how does that affect, your end product? Do you get to, use less to reach the same amount, or is it just that much more loaded with these beneficial cannabinoids? Like talk us through that.
Yeah, it's a good question. So when I think about the hemp that comes from the farm, And what we're seeing from Casad, I think this last year was for sure the best crop we've ever had, and it's extremely expressive in all of the characteristics you're looking for from an actual flower, from a plant. But what we're waiting for right now, which is interesting you bring this up, and I've been waiting 3 years to do this, is we sent our product, so just the straight hemp infusion oil, a leading competitor's brand, and then some like, I was going to just say their name, but and then like a broad spectrum that you see somehow on the shelves at, you know, again, premium retailers. Have to be diplomatic. And we we sent this stuff in because what's happening is people in the hemp space are doing cannabinoid and terpene profiles, and then they're saying it doesn't have all this junk in it, but they're not doing polyphenols, fatty acids, chlorophyll, plant sterols, and other phytonutrient testing because no one asked for it and no one cares, and they don't have it. So what we're going to look at, and I talked to my graphic designer buddy yesterday, is I hope, and it might be negligible what we see, but I want to see that our green, nutrient dense oil is this bouquet of naturally occurring nutrients, whereas the competitor stuff that's the same price, but it's yellow or clear, is just like, you know, a two-person band, and we're a damn orchestra. God, Kyle, you're right. I just realized I navigate life with metaphors.
No joke, man. It comes naturally. You don't even know that you're doing it, but for me, I'm recognizing the poetry.
Oh, it just helps me understand things, and I think it's a way of communicating with others as well. So that's funny. I don't think about it, but so to answer your question, I believe that the where the rubber hits the road for the consumers with regenerative, whether it's tomatoes, potatoes, or hemp, is nutrient density and impact on land and community. But we haven't done the biomass testing, but we're doing the finished product testing right now. So that's a combination of, you know, the farming practices, which at the core of Onda is super high level farming practices, really artisanal, slow production. That's the dream team combo, whether you're making wine or potato chips or hemp medicine. It's input, farming, and how you process it to get it to the consumer. To me, that makes a product exceptional. So I hope to share that with you in coming weeks to see, like, wow, this is the difference between, because everyone said, oh, so it's CBD oil. And I'm like, well, and I don't want to make it complicated, but it's not just CBD oil. It's right. CBD.
Stephen hates when I call it CBD. He's like, no, man.
No, he's right, though, because people that want a CBD product, you know, come to us. It's kind of like if you had a conventional spongy cardboard tasting strawberry next to a super tight backyard biodynamic strawberry, and it's like, well, they're both strawberries. But holy moly, this one is so different, right? So I have to figure out, I have to navigate that communication. I'm not great at it. I say it's whole hemp plant medicine rich in CBD, but I mean, it's a CBD product. It's just much more. So anyway, I'm hoping this kind of testing will help us visually articulate that.
Yeah, I think what you just touched on is something that everyone on this podcast and that everybody in the regenerative movement is feeling. It's like, we don't want to overcomplicate it, but it's so nuanced and it's so hard to effectively communicate in a synthesized message, like the difference between, like you mentioned, those two different strawberries or those two different CBD oils. It's so complicated just naturally. And it's something that we as a movement have to figure out, like, how do we get better at that? Because we want consumers to recognize the difference. And until we reach that threshold in mass, it's going to be more difficult for regenerative brands, medicines, whatever, to truly succeed and to demand either, you know, that price premium or even price parity. Like, how do you differentiate yourself when you can't effectively communicate your unique selling points? Very difficult.
Analogies.
I want to give a shout out to Tina Owens and the nutrient. You're good. The Nutrient Density Alliance. That's a new thing that Green America is kind of sponsoring, and Tina is spearheading. And they're basically trying to work with brands, philanthropists, you know, scientific bodies to do this nutrient density testing, because, like Kyle said, it's always going to be higher to take care of ourselves and our families and our nutrition than to take care of the planet. No matter how eco-conscious you are, like it's just Pavlov's or whatever that hierarchy is. I think it's that guy.
Pavlov's
Maslow's,
a
not
dog, the
Pavlov. Sorry,
salivating dog.
getting my. No, he did the dog experiment. But anyway, so people should check out her work. And they had a meeting at Expo West that I attended, and I heard something crazy there, which was, Stephen, it's really cool that you're testing the end product, because what they shared at this meeting was that most nutrition panels we know are massively flawed, but they are also just the nutrition profile of the ingredients, right? They're not actually the nutrition of the end products. Like Frosted Flakes, they just take the ingredient nutrition profile and they put that on the box, and like we have no idea what it actually is at the end product. So I think that's the other like thing we have to work towards, is full transparency and traceability in the supply chain of the actual ingredient nutrient density testing and then the end product. And that's how we value all these amazing production and processing techniques that all these regenerative brands like Onda are using, and so many others have talked about on this podcast, that are so important. But right now we don't have any way to quantifiably value them and drive that into the commerce of the
and that brings up two things. One, storytelling, right? Super crucial. And I love working with my dear friends at Farmers Footprint on some of that stuff. We're dreaming up some great stories, which we have such an abundance of. And the other is finished product. So I see this in the hemp space where people are starting to say, we're a whole plant. And it's like, well, yeah, maybe you started with the whole plant, but you sure as hell didn't keep it all the way through. And so this messaging is so funny. Like I saw this product at a store recently in San Diego, and it says like, it's like super high end packaging, Mesa, like whatever, bougie. And it says whole plant. And I looked at it and I was like, well, where did it go? Because it's not still here. So the messaging can be misleading. Consumers, oh my God, what a time to be a consumer. Like we're deep in it, right? So we have some insights into what's actually going on in the food space, especially in the ReGen spot. But I feel so bad for consumers who are just being beaten over the head with just disingenuous marketing narratives all the time. So, I'm sorry, folks, but here we are. You're doing the work to come hang out with Kyle and Anthony and myself, and hopefully that's empowering in some ways to make decisions, because we can't do this without consumers. And then there's a farm video we did in 2018 where we're talking about regenerative hemp, again, before it was kind of this thing. And I just, at the end of it, I said, it's the consumers. You guys, we need your support, right? And we can talk about changing the world and healing soil all we want, but if you don't sleep better, and if you don't feel better, and if you don't buy our products, then the mechanism that we're a part of isn't empowered. Soapbox off. Soapbox.
No, it's great to hear somebody else preach what I preach. To me, the consumer link is the key. If we don't, like you said, if we don't get that support, then our share continues to remain nominal and insignificant, which means that the majority of the agricultural land is being used in a conventional extractive manner, and we continue to have the same problems that we have today. And I think the reason the three of us and everybody in the regenerative movement is here is to try to solve these problems. And again, it's never going to happen unless we get consumer adoption.
Yeah. And
I
just was going to say very quickly, for years, we were so excited about the Onda as a mechanism for change, as a mechanism to support and interact with regenerative food systems. And I realized in the last couple of years, it's like, that's great. And it will always be a big part of the foundation of our structure. But people are looking out for themselves, and that's okay. Like to your point, right? They want to sleep better. They want less anxiety. They want to relax. So if it does those things and it's supporting regenerative, but I was leading with that. So that's something that comes up with other brand conversations. Is like, you can lead with your ethos, your mission, your do good. But if you don't have an effective, delicious, fun, whatever your goals are, product, it's not going to work. So we're really focusing on that Onda, like we're playing around with some taglines, but it's like whole plant, full life, whole plant, all you. Like it's all about your highest expression of your potential with plant support, and we're regenerative, and that hierarchy of messaging is important right now for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've talked about it a lot with other brands, and it really is a situation where it has to be a lagging value prop, and you have to link the leading value props that are the most important to ReGen and educate the consumer on why it's causing that benefit. Why ReGen is the behind the curtain of that benefit. The thing I want to ask you about, and this is not going to be a super button up question, so bear with me a little bit, and I just want to hear you riff on it, Stephen, is you're the first hemp brand that we have on this podcast. There is a legislation, issue with that. There's a totally different route to market and retail and channel distribution that comes with that product. I mean, there's all these different intangibles, and you've been on this journey now for a long time. And I'm just super kind of curious for you to, I guess, to like take us on that journey or riff on like how all those variables have impacted like your commercial strategy and like where does that sit today? Like I kind of have a behind the scenes view of that, but I'd like you to educate the people that listen to this on what that looks like for a business like yours and with the ingredients and the products that you sell.
The ever growing and immense list of restraining factors in what would look like kind of a CPG growth trajectory, at least what people project on you, whether it's investors or the market or culture, that those restraints are stress inducing, but character building, and have led me down a entrepreneurial journey that I think is very unique. I am banned for life from PayPal and Venmo. I can't get a conventional mainstream line of credit. Never have. I am shadow banned on Instagram. My Facebook, I can't advertise on Facebook or Google or Instagram. So from a D2C perspective, I am deeply handicapped. And I think that, truthfully, I had a bit of a ego death, breakdown, crisis, evolution, Phoenix rising, whatever the hell you want to call it. I mean, the Phoenix was like my backdrop for months. I was like, I got this. But last summer I just crashed, right? And it was just this perfect storm of like a couple of my contractors, because I'm the only full-time employee and I have 5 contractors that are very, very supportive and have specific roles, but they're not full-time. My team was going through independently some really wild family crises. Like, don't need to get into them, but it was unrelated to Onda, and I lost some support, and then we ran out of product, and then things started to spiral, and the boat really started taking on water. And so I had multiple come to Jesus moments where I was like, are you that stubborn? Is it just not going to work? Or do you have to evolve your capacity to reimagine your narrative, timeline, arc, expectations, workflow? And I let go of so much. I let go of this perfect ramp of growth that VC investor people want to see, and can you flip it in 5 years? I just was like, I am done with all of that, and I am holding on like an oak tree in a hurricane, just like swaying in the wind, but I'm rooted, right? And like the tallest trees have the deepest roots. I consolidated aspects of my life. I brought my infusion equipment in-house. I make the oil. I made these decisions, and I made a decision to deeply commit to this business in a way that I had never felt before. And I let go of this masculine Sisyphusian forced grind work ethic that had gotten me really far, but I think was also contributing to my burnout. And I guess I am ranting on this, but it's to say that in and it's not just me, but in pioneering a new market, this was illegal for a long time, right? So people have to realize, like, you can't project a growth trajectory. You can't project a strategy from a wine company or a chips brand or anything where people are like, oh, I know what potato chips are. I know what wine is. What the hell is regenerative hemp oil, CBD oil, right? So we're in a completely different ballpark on a completely different trail with completely different rules. And so I've had to dig into, aspects of my life I didn't know, or myself that I didn't know I had, and either quit or decide to be here. And if I decide to be here, I better damn well be in it for the long haul and do whatever I need to do to, create a narrative and a story that I want to read in 10 years that wasn't like, oh, it got uncomfortable and I quit. Like it's like it's trippier than some of the most profound psychedelic journeys I've been on. And I mean that with the most integrity and sincerity, because it's like, if your heart and your soul is not deeply into something that's, business and entrepreneurial, and you go through these kind of restraints and obstacles, you're out, right? You just bail. And the community that I'm a part of, whether it's Renourish Studio or my friends and family, the contractors and teammates I work with, no way in hell I could have done this on my own. That's like, I have to acknowledge that almost above anything else. But in collaboration with this community, we're finding a way, right? And at the core of it, it's like, it's rock and roll. Like, screw the man. Like, I don't want to be suppressed and crippled and crushed by a system that's made for Onda to fail. It's made for me to go, pivot to broad spectrum, strip down, increase efficiency, increase margin, all these things. And, we'll see what happens. I'm not making any promises, but I'd like to believe that we can collectively rewrite a new path, a new way of doing business that's not only applicable to hemp, but could be applicable to other value add products that believe in going anti-commodity, anti-industrial, and so on. So I don't know, I could go into various restraints that we are navigating, really a lot of mindset shifts, to ride this process through. And, arguably some, level of insanity.
Well, hey,
self-deprecating.
I want to give Anthony credit for asking a very open, free-flowing, riffing conversation. Stephen, your answer was beautiful and inspiring. It also really reminded me of a book I read. It's called A Million Miles in 1,000 Years. It talks about that aspect of story and living your life in such a manner that it would be an interesting story that somebody would want to read. I think it's Donald Miller. I can't remember for sure, but highly recommend that book. I think you'd really enjoy it based on everything you shared. One of the things that really struck me in you sharing all of that was, when things got hard, what you were and what you weren't willing to sacrifice. And what you were not willing to sacrifice was exactly like the opposite of all those conventional models of business that you were kind of like mirroring against, right? You were not willing to sacrifice the quality of your product and the processing, to try to make it easier to be like everybody else, where you're just focusing on margins and dollars and creating a successful business model. Instead, you sacrifice aspects of your life and convenience to ensure that whatever it is that you're making is the best possible product for consumption and impact on the planet, which I think is inspiring and just really, really awesome. I appreciate you sharing all that.
Thanks, man. Thanks for saying so. It's like if you had to protect this egg, going through this gnarly storm, and you're just getting hit with stuff. You're like, it's cool, I can take it, because you're holding something that you just, like, you don't want to taint that just because you get hit in the arm with a branch, or I don't know. Again, sorry for, I'm now really conscious of my metaphors, but it's like,
keeping it going.
Dude, it's awesome. Don't apologize for it. I think it's amazing. I think it's one of your superpowers. We just had Juan from Artisan Tropic, who's also participating in the Renourish Studio. He's amazing. And we got some really cool, we got some really cool testament and feedback from him on that program. Love Lauren, love what she's doing there, and just, give you an opportunity to speak to, I guess, more about how that's been and how that's shaped some of those things you just touched on.
Yeah, I mean, in this constant journey of expansion, discomfort, right? Like, that's another thing I'll touch on to lead into Renourish is like, I think we're all programmed naturally to avoid discomfort, right? You go away from discomfort, right. But with a certain level of intellectual override, there's comfort in discomfort. Like, it's a weird trip that I adjusted to last summer where, like, I settled into this discomfort. I'm like, oh yeah, that's fucked. That's really bad, but I'm okay with it, and it's going to be fine. There's this concept. And so that discomfort and that questioning, a lot of people just run away, and some people are learning to really go into it with curiosity. And so when Lauren a year ago and I were talking at Expo about this program, and also to reference the concept of not wanting to be overly reductive and honor the complexity of living systems and some of the things we're working on. But also it's like, okay, cool, I have a minute, like tell me what it is, you know. She was explaining this and I was like, okay, well, I think I know what you're saying. It's this group but at the end of it, it was her, right? I trusted her. I trust people, and I trust feeling, and I trust intuition. And I said, you know, if she's invited me to come sit in this thing, I'm going to do it, right? And that's another thing I was taught 12 years ago. I had a mentor who said, there's a door open, just go through it. Like you know, you know when not to go through a door, but my point is like, just go into an opportunity. And I started that studio kind of right before this burnout crash that I was referring to, and I was highly resistant. I was in these 2-hour Zoom sessions thinking like, who here has a job? Like, can you guys like go get a job? like what are you talking about? I'm just being totally honest, right? Because I was just like, blue sky, cool, sounds great. I need to go sell some oil. I'll talk to y'all later. And I had this resentment, and I had this internal battle with what was going on. But I knew what they were talking about was fascinating. I just felt like it was a luxury to even be discussing it. That was my shit, right? They were on track. But what came out of it was fascinating. And now I'm a year in almost. And not only was it just straight up community support during a crisis as a solo entrepreneur, it was a challenge for me to explore frameworks and models to overcome obstacles, to see things differently, to consider value. For example, 5 capitals. Like I might look at my bank account some months in the business and be like, oh God. And sometimes it's just, yes, it's great, but it's more than financial capital, man. It's social capital. It's our community. It's environmental capital. It's allowed me, Regenerative Studio has allowed me to expand the way I see the potential of my business, and simultaneously encourage me to build my internal and personal, right? Because when I came into it, I was like, is this a personal workshop thing or is this a business thing? And it's like, and so letting go of those boundaries and those structured boundaries in a positive way to realize like, who do I need to be as a man, as a human, as a Stephen, to be the best leader for Onda to be the best it can be. So it's, again, I would sum it up as like a 3-year regenerative business incubator of sorts, right? That's the short pitch for me. I don't know if that's what they would say, but it's been highly expansive, supportive, and empowering for me personally and the business in ways that I hadn't imagined before. Yeah, it's a trip. Man. Yeah, so I'm super grateful to be in it. I'm surrounded by family. I mean, you know, in the past 3 years of so many of us looking at screens, you know, which we do every week, but we get together in person, and those in-person meetings with other people that are super passionate about regenerative business and personal development, it's powerful. Yeah, so I'm a big supporter and encourage anyone to check it out if it's of interest. It's been kind of like right on time.
That's incredible. I'm very interested in learning more. I think, you know, I've had a couple of conversations with Lauren. She seems fantastic. Love what we heard from Juan. So yeah, curious to dig in more and to figure out, you know, how this is going to affect everybody who's participating. You know what I mean? Like everybody we talk to who's involved has nothing but incredible things to say, including that it's really hard. You know, nobody does this because it's easy. It's challenging, but in the best way. Again, based on what I've heard. I'm not a participant.
No, a lot of times you just leave really confused, you know, but it doesn't feel disruptive just for the sake of being disruptive, right? There's a lot of like, and there's a lot of openness that leaves you thinking about it all week, right? So again, I can't really sum it up. I can't put my finger on it other than what I've said, but I feel good and it feels good for Onda. So I'm going to stick with it. And we've got 2 more years in this first cohort. Yeah. At the very least, I get to hang out with Juan. I mean, he's amazing.
He's the man.
He's so cool.
Um, Stephen, taking us home with a final couple questions. The first one is on the focus, which is what does the future hold? What's the future vision? What do you want people to be aware of? What do you want to ask for from the community? What's coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, really, it comes back to first thing that comes to mind, I should say, is the consumers and spread the word. If you like what we do, buy our products, subscribe. We'll reciprocate big discounts. We'll do the best we can. Committing to Onda, integrating that into your life, committing to yourself, and spreading the word is huge because we're really restricted in how we can reach new customers and communicate at the moment, although we're getting clever. But really, we're focusing on some really exciting bulk and white label opportunities right now, internationally and domestically. So, our product may not resonate with the masses, and I have no interest in it being a Pepsi or a large corporation. But the people that really understand what we do are some of the leaders in skincare and wellness, and so they're looking to Onda to be a super ingredient. Because it is. It's like the Intel inside. It's the Gore-Tex. It's this kind of, super boosted nutrient ingredient that makes skincare products more anti-inflammatory. It helps your sleep product. So that's something that's been great as I sink a little bit deeper into the production and growing some herbs this summer to use in our products is partnerships with folks that want to use Onda as an ingredient. Still launching new products, slow and steady. Probably a recovery product next. We're looking at like a pâté de fruits, which is a high-end culinary gummy with site-specific ingredients, and maybe a smoke blend, just because I send people, flour to smoke and they like it. So maybe that, although that's a bit of a deviation, but really not looking to launch too many more products anytime soon. Maybe some soft gels for our herbal blends. I mean, I'd say if we really take some steps way out into the future, because I'm a dreamer, I've had this idea for many years to, partner with other hemp manufacturers outside of the medicine space. So when we look at our partnership with Young Maven, these are both hemp, shirts or whatever, or insulation, fiber, all of these other uses that I wrote about in my senior high school thesis paper. I also consider, the silo that organic and regenerative is in, and how do we get more producers to transition. Hemp would be a fantastic mechanism there because it's a phytoremediator. So if we could build up the infrastructure on manufacturing of insulation, fiber, and all these other hemp value add products, we could be growing hemp, cleaning up soil, assuming there's no off gas or any issue there. And we could be converting conventional land to organic through those types of hemp. And then we could be putting, growing more hemp medicine where it needs to happen. So I like the idea of Onda being a regenerative hemp company, expanding laterally into other types of hemp. That's fun to dream about. And then, I don't know. Just partnerships and making the best damn product we can make. I would love to shift to more of a farming kind of, land management visionary role. And I mean, I was an art student. I don't know how they gave me a CEO title. Well, I did. I put it on my card. No one argued, right? But I don't know that I make jokes about that because I would imagine there's someone who's maybe more suited for a CEO role in the long run, but I sure do enjoy it at the moment. Mm-hmm. So, just trying to enjoy the ride, have some fun, rest when I need to rest, be grateful that when I go to sleep at night, I'm not only sleeping great because of my product, but I have a full heart knowing that we never cut corners and we hold the line. That's important to us.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Love that, man. Let that be your North Star. I think you just kind of answered this question a little bit there, but the last question we always wrap with, and we get tons of different answers, and I don't think there's a right one for this one, right? Let's look macro, let's back out, and let's say, how do we really scale regenerative agriculture? Or maybe scale is not the right word, but whatever that right word is. And the direct quantifiable is, how do we get ReGen brands to have 50% market share by 2050?
Consumers. That's a complex thing. Nothing's really, I mean, it's not one answer, right? And we don't want to be overly reductive, but one thing that just came to mind is, and I hate to think like this, but real change, sadly, in this culture happens with trauma. And if we see systems collapse, if we see infrastructure fail, if we see supply chains crumble, and I'm just riffing, right? I'm not saying this is what it'll take. And I hope to God this isn't what it takes. But I mean, come on, we know the world we live in. We might see ReGen biodynamic foods as a viable solution to battle the crumbling of this fragile house of cards that we've built. And if we look at ReGen biodynamic foods and medicines as more resilient, bioregional options, maybe it's going to resonate. I mean, look what happened during COVID. All of a sudden, everyone bakes bread and has a garden. I'm not mad, I'm not mad at that, but that's what it took. I mean, you couldn't get seeds, right? That's scary. So I think the other side, the brighter side of that kind of path or that conversation is people feeling better, people feeling happier, people feeling healthier, people saying, wow, something is different, and hopefully they can correlate it to a healthier, more nutrient-dense diet from healthy and clean soil. And that's enough. Now we're going to have to look at, cost and how we can do that, but it's a snowball. The more people that support Onda, the more people that support Artisan Tropic, the more impact we can make, and the more farmers are incentivized to transition their farming practices because the consumers are voting for it. So I think we have to meet our consumers in the middle. We need to not be greedy, and we need to encourage them to step up and, maybe have one less $20 apple martini and vote for some healthy food. That was a really random thing to say, but my point is, like, we all spend money on stuff that, if we took like one or two things out a month, or we pivoted our budget a little bit, we could be supporting regenerative brands.
When at the same time reporting ourselves as individuals and as healthy entities, right? So it's like it's this mutually beneficial support. It's taking care of yourself is also taking care of the planet in like the weirdest way, but it makes so much sense when you really think about it. But again, totally aligned with your consumer answer. Again, not to be too reductionist, but I do think that's the linchpin.
Yeah.
It's about responsibility, right? And it's about acknowledging and the realization that we're part of all these systems. And right now we step back from them and we give and take, mainly take from whatever we want. And we think the thing just spins around, and it hasn't changed at all from that interaction because it's so big that we don't see it, but it has, and it is. And, my biggest concern is we're going to get to some of those failures that you mentioned, Stephen, and we're not going to have the ability to recover from them. That's
I think that's a reasonable concern. But I don't have kids, but I think about if I was a parent, I'd want to show up for my kids on the highest level possible, and that's investing in yourself, and that's eating good food and teaching children these ways. I think the younger generation is super hip to this. Like at Expo, I was hanging out with someone who's just was blowing my socks off with what she's interested in, what she's studying, what she's working on, and she's 24. And I was thinking, oh my God, when I was 24, I was just, racing mountain bikes and bartending and having fun. And so I'm really optimistic about some of the folks that are coming into the space, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready to throw down, in all the right ways. So, yeah, I mean, all we can do is hope. I mean, even if you think that the environment and that the boat's gone too far, like, at least have fun, and be a healthy person so your kids can be happy and healthy. Like the environment and that's a bigger conversation, but just on the personal level, invest in your body and your health.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Understand the truth of the current reality, but be very hopeful. I mean, I feel like that's where I'm at, and I feel like that's what we're trying to convey for sure.
Yeah. It just feels
awesome.
Human. Yeah.
Yeah, feeling human is we have to be connected to our food system. We have to understand the impacts of the choices that we make, what we choose to support, what we vote with our dollar, like you mentioned. But man, just thank you for the time. Thank you for sharing everything you shared. This has been an incredible episode. So yeah, just want to say thanks.
Man, thank you. I mean, you guys are putting in the time to connect the mycelium, the web of people. And, you know, a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of people in this space, we might live in this like rural corner of Northeast Oregon, for example, or anywhere. And to know that there's community out there and that we're together in this is really inspiring. So thanks for all your hard work.
We get the easy job. We showcase the hard work that everybody else is doing.
Well, it just makes it that much more worthwhile. So thank you.
All right, brother. Appreciate you, man. Thank you.
For show notes, episode transcripts, and more information on our guests and what we discuss on the show, check out our website, regen-brands.com. That is regen-brands.com. You can also find our ReGen recaps on the website. ReGen recaps take less than 5 minutes to read and cover all the key points of the full hour-long conversations. You can check out our YouTube channel, ReGen Brands Podcast, for all of our episodes with both video and audio. The best way to support our work is to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform, subscribe to future episodes, and share the show with your friends. Thanks for tuning in to the ReGen Brands Podcast, brought to you by the ReGen Coalition and Outlaw Ventures. We hope you learned something new in this episode, and it empowers you to use your voice, your time, and your dollars to help us build a better and more regenerative food system. Love you guys.